Project Ascension, Chapter 15, by Darthlink22 and The Myth. Twilight galloped as fast as he could to the hospital wing of the palace. Even though Bloodwing was gone, and the magic stolen from others was returned to them, there was still the critical condition of her son Spike that worried her to no end. As she reached the doors, she marched right through them and found the doctors overlooking the still formless Spike with panic expressions on their faces. "Mrs. Barker, we—" "What's going on here?" she demanded to know from the doctors. One of them shook his head with eyes closed shut before reaching out a hoof to her and closing a hug. "I'm sorry, Miss Barker. Your son didn't make it," he said with bitterness in his voice. He was not accustomed to telling the parents of their own child's untimely demise. Another doctor took a blanket and covered the baby dragon's face with it, a sign of final rest. Twilight's eyes widened to the size of saucers as she pushed her way through the doctors until she reached the still body of Spike and held him close to her. He was no longer painful to the touch. "Spike! You must concentrate! Remember your form! Your dragon form! Please don't leave me! Spike!" she begged to her son as she gently shook him in her embrace, feeling only a cold, icy coldness. The doctors of the theater opened again, with all of Twilight's friends, the cutie Crusaders, Blaze and Light, and the princesses, all entering to find Twilight crying over Spike's body. The group gasped in shock, then soon turned to morbid sadness. "Miss Barker, please, we—" "No! Spike! Remember your form! Spike!" Twilight shouted as she sobbed continuously. She begged for an answer, but was met with only dead silence. Her lips quivered as she could only hold onto his body and release a torrent of tears from her eyes. All the ponies in the room were shedding tears for the mourning mother before them, though the one who was shedding tears the most out of the group was Celestia herself. She removed her crown from her head as a sign of respect, and her tears were forming a pool as they fell to the ground. She walked slowly to Twilight, encasing her wing over her student. "I'm so sorry, Twilight. I'm so sorry," she whispered softly to her student's ears as she saw the body of Spike laying limp in the unicorn's hold. Twilight rose her head slowly, looking down at her son's body. "Spike, I love you so much," she said softly to him, closing her eyes and kissing his forehead for what would be the last time ever. She returned crying into his shoulders as her son was now gone. "Mom?" Spike felt nothing but an endless shiver of cold running through him. All he saw was darkness around him, darkness that showed no end in sight. He tried to lift up his arms, but found that he couldn't. He looked down on himself, only seeing nothing but the same darkness. He tried running to what he thought was the other side, but he made no progress at all. The only thing that met him was the same chill that would not go away. The last time he felt this kind of cold was when the others played a prank on him, having him nearly drown in the river. He remembered waking up to the call of his mother, who he saw was crying endless tears of joy, regret, and sorrow. He remembered the warmth he felt from her when she would not let go of her embrace from his tiny body, seeing Spike shiver uncontrollably. Spike also saw the other ponies without the mirth they had earlier for witnessing the wrap-up on time. Spike was trying his best to remember warm feelings he had had before being in this state. There were many memories, but the most prominent one was when he confessed to Twilight, marking the day he would forever call her Mom. She was already his mother, but saying the word to her was proof of that recognition. This had given him a joy he had sought for so long. What made it even more worthwhile was the jubilation he gave his mother by loving her as her son. But now, in this cold space, he was alone. "So, is this what death is like?" he asked himself somberly, thinking only of his mother who was now out of his grasp. He closed his eyes again, at least what he thought were his eyes, trying his best to rid himself of the sorrow that was now filling him. "Spike, you must concentrate! Remember your form! Your dragon form! Please don't leave me! Spike!" Twilight's voice rang, alerting Spike to look around again. Her voice echoed in the dark space. He tried to call out to her, but no voice emitted from him. He decided to venture in every direction to find the source of the voice, but it grew fainter by the minute. He He then felt a force pulling him away from the voice, but he turned and saw nothing. This reminded him of the nightmare he had, calling out to Twilight, who was not helping him one bit. Spike felt himself slipping away, further into the abyss, feeling his very soul becoming one with the darkness. "Miss Sparkle, please, we—"
"No, Spike! Remember your form! Spike!"
The words were faint, but still there. He thought of what his form was, the form of the baby dragon he was before. He thought hard on this form, feeling a sense of warmth coming from him. The darkness would not cease, dragging him further. He tried, but nothing was working for him. He remembered his life as though it had flashed before him, thought that this was the end for good. No! With new vigor, he focused harder on the warmth in him and felt a heartbeat. Is this my heart? He asked himself in his mind, and focused harder on it. The beat was becoming louder, until it echoed across the darkness. The darkness seemed to crumble around him, being replaced by a shining light. When the darkness was snuffed out of space, the light shined so brightly it replaced the chill in him with a warm sensation. Spike found himself on a plain of endless white, feeling calmer than he did a few moments ago. "Mom!" He called in for his mother, in the endless space ahead of him.
"Spike!"
He heard the voice, and he made his way closer to it, hoping he would find out where the exit was to this place.
"I feel so weird,"
he told himself as he tried to move, but could not see his body one bit.
"Spike, concentrate. Pull together."
He then heard the same voice again, this time from above. With new determination, he reached out to the voice. He was, however, finding difficulty reaching for the top, as it was blinding his vision as he came closer to the night.
"I'm trying to, but it's so hard."
He spoke to no one in particular, but had a feeling his mother had heard him, wherever she could be.
"You're doing it."
She heard again, only this time clearer as he zoomed towards the source of the voice. The voice of Twilight Sparkle, his mother. Twilight's wails were nearly deafened as the other ponies, though none of them asked her to silence. Her worst fears were realized. Her son was dead, stolen from her. It wasn't fair. There was still so much she wanted to do. See him grow up, me a nice mare.
"Mom?"
Her eyes shot open. It was Spike's voice, though heavily distorted. What shocked her more, though, was Spike's body was glowing brightly, nearly blinding her.
"Spike?"
She dared. The form seemed to be twitching. The other ponies were gaping.
"Could it be? I feels weird."
"Spike, listen! You need to concentrate!" she yelled, holding himself closer to her. His form burnt her again, but she paid little mind to the pain in her chest. "Pull yourself together! Please!"
"I'm trying. It's hard,"
he said again in his distorted voice. It was glowing brighter and twitching more in Twilight's embrace.
Come on, you're doing it,"
she encouraged, keeping him in her embrace. She felt him solidify, and the light was receding from him. She dared not open her eyes or let him go. She felt his chest moving up and down against hers. She beamed, and tears of joy were cascading from her closed eyes. She gently rubbed his back, feeling very soft fur. Her eyes shot open in surprise, and her hoof stopped this moment. She rubbed the forehoof again and felt fur again.
"Fur?"
she thought to herself, feeling no scales. She pulled him away and looked at him, and nearly dropped him. She stared in awe at what happened to Spike. He was now covered in purplish fur, the same color as his scales. In place of quills, he now had a mane with spiky hairstyle, colored in green that had highlights of gold streaking through it, with his tail being the same color and hair now. His arms were now only legs. His claws were replaced with hooves. The one-slitted eyes were now rounded, though the irises were still the same green. There were no fangs projecting from his mouth, and now had a muzzle instead of a nose. From his forehead, a horn was visible to every pony looking at him. Spike was no longer a baby dragon, but a unicorn colt. Spike blinked twice before looking at his mother's eyes that were showing astonishment. He then turned to the others who were shocked and surprised into silence. He turned back to Twilight and looked up into her eyes again.
"Mom?"
he asked softly, feeling slightly weird around his body. When Spike spoke, Twilight smiled broadly and held him tightly. Spike! She held out to him as she peppered Spike with kisses all over his face. My boy, my gorgeous boy, she said softly as she nuzzled him, smiling broadly with more tears flowing freely from her eyes. Once Spike was freed from his mother's hold, all of Twilight's friends made their way to the bedside, each of them all having watery eyes and smiles plastered on their faces. This librarian had some watery eyes and a smile plastered on his face. The cutie marker seer jumped on the bed and grabbed hold of Spike in a true hug, with all the feelies cheering for him. Y'all gave us a fight there, Spike! Evelyn told him as she gave him a soft noogie before returning to the group hug. Scootaloo patted his back, smiling happy. Glad to have you back, Spike! She told him with the few words she could say, feeling slightly guilty for what Spike had to go through earlier. Scootaloo immediately shook it off as he went back into the group hug her friends were giving Spike. Oh, Spike, never do that again! Sleepbell told him as her lips were shaking and a few droplets of tears formed from her eyes. She nuzzled his cheek as they held on to him in a tighter grip. Easy, easy! Spike managed to say as if he were at loss for breath, with him immediately released from the hug and his breath becoming steady again. He felt weird, though, as if he changed in more ways than one. He felt a hoof on his shoulder and turned to see Twilight smiling softly at him. As though by impulse, he reached her and held on to her, with her doing the same. As the others gave their well wishes to Spike, Celestia and Luna walked up to Twilight and her child. Celestia smiled softly to Spike, as she craned her neck down to both Twilight and Spike's level, nuzzling each one of them in turn, looking deeply into Spike's eyes. I'm happy you are still with us, Spike, she whispered to Spike as she lifted her head upwards. Spike in turn smiled at the princess. Thank you, princess, but I feel so weird, though. He said. Not once had he looked at his body. Luna stepped forward with a tiny mirror held by her magic. Take a look at yourself, and you will see, little colt, Luna told him, with a knowing smile of her own as she gave it to Spike. Spike was still confused, but complied, taking the mirror and looking to it. His eyes widened in shock as he stared at his face. Had no skills or quills on his head. He dropped the mirror on the bed and turned his head to look sharply in every corner to view his changed body. I'm a pony? He asked in amazement, turning to Twilight. Mom, what's going on? Twilight shook her head as she shrugged in confusion. I don't know how it happened, but maybe it could be... Celestia intervened. I think we all need to rest first, Twilight, since we've all had a very long day, she said to Twilight with her motherly tone, seeing the fatigue in every pony's eyes. Twilight Sparkle stood up from the bed and used her magic to place Spike on top of her back, seeing as he would need a little time to become more accustomed to the changes. I think so too, she replied to her mentor, and looked back at the others, who were also tired for today's experiences. Once the cutie marker sayers jumped off the bed, they were also placed onto their respective guardians' backs. Okay, that image is dust. Oh. Scootaloo was a bit surprised at being placed on Rainbow's back, but she immediately closed her eyes as the warmth from the cyan mare was coming to her senses. Is this what it feels like? To have a mother? She asked herself as she slowly drifted off into deep sleep. Rainbow turned her neck and saw the little filly sound asleep, seeing the smile on Scootaloo's face. Rainbow smiled in return before turning her head to the other side of the room, where Blaze and Light were standing. Princess Celestia, Princess Luna. What about them? She asked as both sisters as she pointed to Blaze and his little brother. Blaze will have to stand trial, Celestia said firmly. For tonight, however, they will be treated with the utmost care. She turned to her guards. Take them to a guest room. Get nurses to tend to any injuries. Bring them food and anything else they may need. But Blaze is still under arrest. Do not allow him to leave. As soon as he's treated, bind his wings and place guards outside his room. Celestia walked up to Blaze, with Light standing in between them. She saw Light staring at her, as though she would do something to his older brother. But she gave a motherly smile to the littlest Pegasus, and that seemed to ease the tension. For saving my life, my sister, and my faithful subjects, I thank you with all my heart, Blaze. Blaze stood there in awe at the words of the princess spoke to him, and just smirked to Celestia. Don't mention it, princess, he said as he turned to his brother and lifted him onto his back, walking next to the guards and looking at each one of them. Let's go. The guards nodded and then motioned for the two Pegasi to follow them. As soon as they had arrived in the room, Rainbow Dash ran a bath of warm water and gently placed Scootaloo inside it, waking the exhausted filly. She felt the warm water and gentle hooves as she was bathed, like a pure wave of bliss after days of suffering. It was over, and once her bath was over, she was toweled off and gently placed in a large bed. Then Rainbow Dash went to take her own shower. Myth, Darthlink, the images you are putting in my head are adorable. Scootaloo prodded her horn for the 100th time since laying down. It felt odd. It was something she hated, a mark Bloodwing had given her. She felt sick just thinking about what such an awful pony had changed her forever. Rainbow Dash came out, nice and clean, and laid in bed next to her. She pulled the little filly close, draping a foreleg, then a hoof around her and pulling her close. You feeling all right, Squirt? She asked Scootaloo as she held onto her small body. Scootaloo shivered at the touch. She was warm. She scooted in closer. Do you think Princess Celestia could turn me back into a Pegasus? That stunned Rainbow. I don't know. Maybe. Does he like being an alicorn? No! She yelled, causing her to jump. I'm a Pegasus, not an alicorn. I'm a pony. You can't change me. I'm real. Rainbow Dash grabbed her and squeezed her tighter in a hug. Rainbow nuzzled the filly affectionately, hoping it would bring about peace in her. She felt Scootaloo hug back and began to cry. They stayed like that for a few minutes, Rainbow waiting for Scootaloo to calm down. Rainbow Dash kissed her on the top of her head. I know you're real, Squirt, she said. If you really want to, I'll get Celestia to look at you tomorrow. Thank you, she said quietly. And I'll get someone for you to talk about all this. I'm sure we could get the same doctor who helped me after Discord. She assured her further and stroked her mane gently. Scootaloo just looked away as the trail of tears still remained in her eyes. No, it's okay, Dash. I'm fine. Rainbow just gave a stern look that silenced Scootaloo immediately. Kid, no pony goes through what you did, and it's just fine. I'm hiring some pony to talk to you, and that's final, she said with an authoritative voice. Okay, she stammered again, nuzzling closer. There was another moment of silence before she spoke again. Rainbow? Yeah? Are you really going to adopt me? Rainbow Dash grinned playfully. I don't need to, Squirt. At least, I don't think I do. Scootaloo pulled away and looked at her scared. What? You know when Bloodwing got most of you from? Me. Which, I guess I so expected. You're way too awesome just to have any pony's DNA, she said, rubbing Scootaloo's head affectionately. You're already my kid, and if any pony ever tries to tell me otherwise, well, they'll end up worse than Bloodwing or any of his cronies did. Scootaloo blinked, still frozen in shock. Are you sure? Do I look like a liar? Scootaloo tackled the other Pegasus and threw her forelegs around her, crying overly. I love you, Mommy. She spoke as she was sobbing freely in the embrace of Rainbow Dash, feeling as though a wish had been finally granted. Rainbow Dash hugged her back. I love you too, she said softly, crying as well. And I'm sorry I didn't believe you back when this whole mess started, she told her as she nuzzled Scootaloo, overjoyed that the nightmare was finally over. She let Scootaloo cry some more, then reached over and turned out the light. Both her and Scootaloo were in the bed. Holding her child close, she decided to fold her wing over Scootaloo, casing her in a feathery cocoon, pulled the sheets over them as they both drifted off to sleep. Twilight Sparkle was now in her old quarters of the palace, lying in her bed with her son by her side. She dared not let go of him, as her foreleg was wrapped around the body of Spike, which was now a colt's. She could hear his breathing as she leapt closer against his chest, just like he did when he asked her to be his mother. Twilight just smiled softly at the irony of it all, He had never had to give permission from her at all, it seemed. She was his mother all the way. She brought him into this world, raised him, and loved him. More importantly, he loved her back. She was still amazed at what happened and had no idea how it came to be. None of the books she had ever read had an explanation for this occurrence, and certainly for this kind of magic. Though it wasn't as if she minded. She could do nothing but smile demurely at the miracle of what had happened, having her son back alive by her side. She shivered slightly as a sense of dread coursed through her body. What would she tell him about his true origins? How would he handle it? Would he hate her from now on? Twilight then remembered Celestia's words earlier about his heart, and how she gave birth to it via magic, and how it was his own unique heart, not just a copy or a fake one. A tear rolled down her eye and down her cheek. She kissed his cheek softly, feeling him snuggling closer into her chest.
I love you, my beautiful boy,
She whispered to him, as she soon too was succumbed by sleep's embrace. The door of her room slowly opened, until Celestia walked in quietly to the bedside of her student, Spike. She looked down on both of them, and could not help but give a soft smile as her eyes became moist from the experiences both Twilight and Spike had to go through recently. She blinked her eyes, and her horn began to glow dimly, as she lowered it into the sleeping bodies of Twilight and Spike. Once she touched Spike's horn, her eyes became white as he now ventured into the mind of the little colt. She opened her eyes again to see nothing but endless white. She looked around her until she found her target. She walked up toward a heart-shaped object that was glowing brightly in a purple aura, and it was emitting a warmth that soon fell over Celestia's body as she was getting closer to it. She used her horn and observed the object, multiple images flashing before her eyes. She then pulled away, looking at it in awe before smiling broadly at what she just saw.
So, that's what happened,
she said to herself as she flew off into the distance. Celestia opened her eyes and raised her head as she was back in the room where Twilight and Spike were sleeping. She gave a motherly smile to both her student and the colt, who were both still sound asleep. She pressed her muzzle down to both their foreheads, giving each one a tender kiss before lifting her head, turning away from them and exiting through the door. She walked down the hallways, turning until she reached the throne room. Luna was seated, going through a few more papers.
Ah, sister, the one known as Black has been subdued. In the morning, it would be for the best if we changed him back.
Celestia nodded.
Tomorrow. We might have to do it to Scootaloo, too. In the meantime, I believe I have solved the mystery of Spike's transformation.
Luna looked up.
You entered her heart, didn't you?
Indeed I have.
She nodded. It seems, unconsciously or not, Celestia and Spike had always wanted to be a pony. I remember clearly the very day when he first realized he was different. I had been giving Twilight a lesson when Spike crawled up to her and pressed his claw against her hoof. Twilight cooed down, I have a hoof and you have a claw. Then Spike started bawling.
Celestia recalled from the past where Luna was not a part of. Celestia sighed before she continued.
Twilight didn't understand, but I did. He wanted to be the same as Twilight, though she loved him very dearly already. Even as he accepted it, he still longed to change who he was on the outside. When Twilight called to him to remember his form, he remembered into what he always pictured himself as being: a pony, more specifically, a unicorn foal, to be like his mother.
Luna looked at Celestia with confusion as she raised her eyebrow.
But sister, surely his will alone could have not have brought such change,
she said as he was playing devil's advocate. Celestia closed her eyes, and she slowly opened again.
I said this before to Twilight. His heart was always that of the ponies, hence why he was able to adapt to pony society, and why he carries little, if none, of the dragon traits like the others do. A part of Twilight resides in him, just as a part of Twilight Velvet lives in Twilight Sparkle. Spike, from the day he was born, always had the heart of a pony, with the nurturing love he received from ponies such as Twilight and myself. His heart was able to further develop into that of ponies, though now he has the body of a pony, one he unconsciously desired for so long.
Luna pondered this information for a while, tapping her hoof to her chin.
An interesting hypothesis, but what does this mean for him? Has he lost the dragon's lifespan? I'm unsure. Time will tell, I presume. I will have tests run on him tomorrow. In the meantime, I'd like to see what was salvaged from Bloodwing's lab. Perhaps his studies will yield a silver lining in all this. But first, Luna, come here. With that, Celestia grabbed Luna into a big embrace, holding her little sister tightly. Sister, what on earth is this? Well, with all the big sibling moments going on between Rainbow Dash and Scootaloo and Twilight and Spike, I figured I needed one of these two. We haven't hugged each other in a while. All right, dear sister. One big hug. The sun's ray was now beaming through the windows of the palace, signaling the start of a new day. The beams shined on the face of Blaze Stream, who opened them lazily and blocked them with his one bandaged hoof. He got up from the soft bed and looked around him to see his little brother, still fast asleep in the corner of the room. He stretched his body, but felt something covering his wings, and turned to see a restraining cloth covered them, and sealed with magic. He let out a sigh as he looked back to his brother, smiling at him. This beats the streets or the lab any day, he said to himself as he walked up to his brother and gently nudged him. Hey, Light! Time to wake up, he said softly, seeing his brother groan and opening his eyes to reveal a sky blue colored iris. Hey, bro, where are we? He asked Blaze as he lifted himself from the bed hesitantly, as it was so soft, barely remember falling asleep in it. Blaze just looked from left to right before turning to his brother. Well, by the looks of things, we are currently in one of the palace's top guest rooms, meaning you're free from the cover cell. He grinned at his bro's shocked face. Light smiled broadly and tackled his bro, hugging them, and both were laughing hysterically. Blaze, however, decided to hold his brother down and give him a playful noogie. Stop that! That tickles! Light pleaded in a few giggles as Blaze continued on. What's the magic word? Uncle? Guess again! Uranus? Light said jokingly as Blaze would not let go. Oh, now you're just asking for it! Blaze retorted as he continued to ruffle his brother's head furiously, both laughing at the merriment that they were both in. The doors of their rooms suddenly opened, with Princess Celestia, Twilight, and two of her guards walking in. Once he stopped before the brothers, she looked in surprise at the two lying on the floor playing. Both Blaze and Light felt awkward and looked at each other with blank faces before letting go and standing up from the ground, chuckling slightly before looking at the princesses before them. Good morning? Blaze said casually to Celestia as he waved at his hoof to her. Celestia giggled slightly at seeing this. Good morning, you two. Twilight just stared at Blaze curiously, raising her eyebrows slightly at the playful nature of the Pegasus before her. Blaze looked at Twilight for a second before smiling brightly, waving his hoof casually at her. Yo! How's the little guy doing? Spike? Twilight asked. He's fine. Doctors are examining him now. He's having trouble doing anything right now. He can hardly walk more than a few steps on 4 legs. I asked her to accompany me. It's time for your hearing. Already? I wish to end this as soon as possible. Please, follow us, and we'll have this whole thing over with. Blaze nodded, looking resigned. Light looked worried, but didn't say anything as the two guards flanked his brother and led him out the room. Follow us, little one, Celestia asked gently, before turning toward the door herself. With a gulp, Light followed. Now, concentrate, son. Concentrate. Spike obeyed the command, looking at his hoof intently. There was a bit of straining, and the hoof began to simmer it. That's it. That's it. Finally, after a bit, Spike's hoof began to grow points, claws. Then Spike gave it to his assassin, allowing his appendage to lose the digits it grew. Amazing, the doctor said, finding his findings down. You seem to have your dragon form down in there somewhere. With a little practice, perhaps you can return to it. So, I can be both? There's no proof you can't be more, the doctor said excitedly. Maybe you could shape shift to anything. There's never been a creature like you. Spike dimmed a bit. What do you mean? Something made of pure unicorn magic. You're one of a kind. There's so much for us to explore. This might mean a paper in every medical journal in Equestria. Spike tuned him out. Never been a creature like you.
He sighed. Having learned this morning that he was just a doll made out of simple fabric that brought to life thanks to his mother was bad enough, but now to be simply called a creature made him feel pessimistic beyond belief. He looked to his hooves again, raising them to his horn. It felt weird now that he had an extra appendage on his head. One that he could do so much with, just like his mother. Spike raised his eyes to a cup that was standing on a table at the far end of the room, a cup that had water in it. He did not bother asking the doctor for it, seeing he was too preoccupied yammering a storm of find of the century. Spike remembered how his mother had always talked about magic could be used as a hand. So, he envisioned bringing the cup toward him. Looking intently at it, a faint purple aura engulfed it. His eyes widened slightly by this, making him focus harder. When the aura brightened, he could feel the cup as though it was in his grasp. He then imagined being pulled toward him, slowly. It hovered toward the colt, and Spike could hear the doctor's blabbering stop abruptly at seeing this. When the cup made its way to Spike's lips, he tilted it, emptying the cup in one go. The doctor simply cut his hooves. Remarkable! You can also perform unicorn-based magic. Note to self, this creature is not only composed of pure unicorn magic, but is able to exercise unicorn magic too, he said to himself, failing to Spike's glimmering eyes that were becoming watery. What this creature is, a pony, and he is my son. Both the doctor and Spike turned to the voice that came from the door of the room, with Twilight Sparkle standing in the doorway. And I would appreciate it if you did not refer to Spike like that, she said to the doctor coldly, as he trotted toward them and reached for her son, wiping the buildup of tears from his eyes. What say we go get some breakfast, huh, Spike? She asked him in a warm, soft voice. That seemed to ease the stress of building up him. Okay. He replied as he stood up from the bed, and stood up on four hooves, making his way outside. Though wobbling a bit, he adapted fast to his new way of movement. Once he was out of the room, he turned to look to his mother, who was still in the room. Just wait a moment, Spike. I need to have a good word for the good doctor for a sec, Twilight told him as he waved to him and closed the door. Spike grimaced at what would happen to the doctor now, seeing as he's one of the few who saw Twilight Sparkle become absolutely furious and lived to tell the tale. He sighed and made a way to a chair, exercising magic on a stack of books, hoping to find something interesting to pass the time. Once he closed the door, a warm smile turned grim as he turned towards the doctor and looked down with cold eyes. We need to talk. And so, Luna read the decree, based on testimony, it is the decision of this court that your punishment will be served under house arrest, and a location to be decided on a later date. You will be permitted to leave work only for work, and to care for your little brother. This will remain in force until such time as your overseer sees that you are fit to re-enter society. With that, the alicorn banged her gavel, leading to some murmurs across the room. Blaze looked relieved, while Light, sitting in the crowd, exhaled a breath of relief. The nightmare of being captain of Bloodwing was over, and there seemed to be little way of the future trouble. Luckily, this court case was held by the fabulous lawyer Phoenix Wright. Are you sure, little Run? Celestia asked. Scootaloo nodded. I don't want to keep what Bloodwing gave me. She sighed and looked to her side, where Rainbow Dance was swaying. I want to be a Pegasus, like my mom, she said, seeing Rainbow smile proudly at her. I could change you back, Celestia assured, but I think you must know. I could take away some pony's alicorn status. Giving it is something else entirely. If I were to do so, you may not be able to turn back. So I'll ask one final time, my little pony. Do you wish to lose your strength and horn? Yes, Scootaloo said without hesitation. Very well, she sighed. Come here, little one. Scootaloo shuffled and looked toward her mother. When she gave the nod to go on, she stepped toward the princess, looking nervous. Will it hurt? Not in the slightest, asserted Celestia as she lit up her horn. She lowered herself to Scootaloo's level and connected her horn with the filly's. Once the horns touched each other, Scootaloo's eyes shot open, revealing white where her pupils once were. Her body shivered in pinkish aurora, and her horn began to disappear from existence. She started shrinking only by a little, until the horn was truly gone. Once she stopped glowing, she blinked twice and placed her one hoof onto her forehead. It felt smooth, as though the horn were never there. She felt a burst of happiness take over and squeaked when she jumped into the air, floating in mid-air thanks to her wings that could hold her now. Well, it looks like I'm going to have competition now for being top Wonderbolt, She remarked as Scootaloo floated to her mother's hooves as he was hugged firmly by the silent Pegasus, who nuzzled her affectionately. Both she and Scootaloo looked up to Celestia and saw her smile. "Thank you for helping her out, Princess," Rainbow told Celestia as she let go of Scootaloo once they landed on the ground. Princess Celestia shook her head with a warm smile. "Oh, my dear Rainbow, it is I who should be thanking you for saving Equestria multiple times. Your endless loyalty to me and my sister is one which we would have hardly seen, and for that I thank you. If there is any more I could do for you, please do not be afraid to ask." She said to Rainbow Dash, feeling that there had to be more she could do for the Pegasus and her daughter. "Hey, if something comes to mind, I'll let you know, okay?" Dash replied, and a rumble escaped her stomach. "Now, I think about it, breakfast still on?" she asked imperiously to the princess, seeing her and Scootaloo giggling. "Why, yes, it is. Follow me, please." Scootaloo suddenly walked in front of Celestia. "Princess, wait! There is something I wish to ask you. A little favor, if I may," she said slightly. Celestia lowered her head to a filly's. "Of course you may, Scootaloo. What is it?" she asked kindly to Scootaloo, and laid her ear to the filly's mouth. As Scootaloo whispered her request, Celestia's smile grew wider by the minute, until Scootaloo backed away and Celestia lifted her head up. "I believe that can be done," she said with a playful wink to the filly. "Now let's go and have ourselves some breakfast, shall we?" Rainbow scratched her head in confusion and walked up to Scootaloo. "What did you ask her exactly?" she asked the filly. Scootaloo just giggled. "It's a secret," she told Rainbow playfully, and walked onward toward the dining hall. "We'll find out sooner or later, I suppose." Spike and Twilight were both walking down the hallway toward the dining hall, seeing as they had both not eaten anything in a while. Twilight and Spike walked side by side together, seeing Spike would lose balance at some point, and his mother would always be there to catch him when he fell. Twilight caught Spike again and balanced him onto his hooves, though she had noticed the frown on his face. "Hey, Spike, I know this is going to take some time, but you must know it's not that," he whispered as he turned away from Twilight, hiding the buildup of mortification that was etching on his face. "Spike, it's just you heard what the doctor said to me. I'm not a dragon. I'm not a pony. Twilight stopped and scooped him up in her front legs, letting him cry a bit. Then she spoke. "I bugged that doctor several different ways for not watching what he said." She kissed his muzzle. "It doesn't matter what you are, Spike. You turning into a pony hasn't made me love you any more or less. Your change hasn't made you better or worse. Whatever change you take, you are still Spike. A sweet boy, a good friend, and a wonderful son." Spike nuzzled his mother a bit. Her words increased his tears as though they weren't falling for some reason as before. "Now come on, let's get you some breakfast. We can talk about some changes while we eat." "Changes? Oh, nothing bad," Twilight said. "You'll still be getting magic glasses from me until you get the basics down. And now that you're a pony, you need to watch what you eat. You can't just down anything anymore." "No gemstones?" "Afraid not. But ice cream's still on the menu. And I know you like the candlelight stuffed recipe." "Pancakes?" Spike asked eagerly, his stomach growling at the very moment. Twilight smiled tenderly at her son. "Of course not. But you have to eat healthy foods too, you know," she said with a wink. Spike just shrugged. "Okay." He then wobbled again, let out a yelp as he was falling, but it felt his body smooth and stop. He then saw Twilight holding him in place thanks to her magic. "Thanks, Mom." "Always here for you, Spike. Always." As they were nearing the dining hall's entrance, Spike turned to Twilight and looked into her eyes with glassy eyes. "Mom?" Twilight was then taken a bit aback, fearing he may cry again. "What is it, Spike?" Spike stood on his hind legs, wrapping his forelegs around her neck. He then planted a kiss on her cheek before resting his head on her shoulder. "Thank you again for everything. I love you." Twilight just stood there sniffling, before scooped him again, nuzzled him furiously as she was sobbing dolefully. "I love you too, my little Spike."